listening to the Hunter Conservationist Podcast.
You know, Charles Whitwam from Howl for Wildlife, I heard him say one time in one of his little talking head videos that he does so well on his Howl for Wildlife channel. He said, when hunters and trappers get together as a unified voice, they're a juggernaut, a force that can't be ignored politically. And I love that word. I stuck it into the title of this show. It's just a cool word. But I think that synergy is happening in Canada. I feel it. Like it just, the last 6 months to a year have felt really different across this country. More partnerships, more collaborations, organizations seem to be connecting and supporting each other. And people are actually getting back together to sitting around actual tables, actual real tables, and having conversations about the future of hunting and wildlife conservation. It's awesome. So this show, we're going to dive into the newest national juggernaut that's developing on the Canadian landscape, the Canadian Wildlife Conservation Partners. Hey, everybody, it's Mark Hall, your host.
And it's Curtis Hall, the co-host. The Hunter Conservationist Podcast is proudly supported by J. Martin Taxidermy. J. Martin Taxidermy is a family-run business built on a foundation of passion, tradition, and a profound respect for nature. Based in West Kelowna, British Columbia, the company was founded by Jesse Martin, a dedicated conservationist, alongside his wife, Casey. Together, they bring a rich legacy of hunting and craftsmanship to every piece that's created. Growing up in the Okanagan, Jesse was surrounded by wildlife and inspired by a home filled with taxidermy that resembled a natural history exhibit. What started as a personal interest soon turned into a lifelong pursuit. After studying wildlife and forestry conservation and completing formal training at the Penn School of Taxidermy, Jesse transformed his passion into a professional craft. Today, he continues to refine his skills by attending national seminars and conventions, always striving for excellence. Each mount produced by J. Martin Taxidermy is more than just a display. It's a lasting tribute to the outdoors and the memories that are made there. As always, big shout out to Jesse and J. Martin Taxidermy for supporting what we do here on this show. So thank you, J. Martin Taxidermy.
I think we might be doing too good of a job promoting Jesse and his business, because I just found out that he's had to cancel his annual elk hunting trip over to our part of the world where Curtis and I live, because he's got too much work that's stacking up in his taxidermy shop. Good problem to have, bad problem to have so early in hunting season. So Jesse, I hope you do find a little bit of a break and get over to your hunting spot before the end of elk season. So, folks, one of the things we do, because Jesse's a taxidermist and the title sponsor for the show, I've been having these little kind of like facts about taxidermy that we just kind of insert before we dive into the conversation. So every show, I think I'm going to be out of facts, you know, because taxidermy is only like such a big thing in the history of civilization. But I always manage to find something every show. So in Hyde Park in London in 1851, there was the Great Exhibition, and there were a number of taxidermists that exhibited at the Great Exhibition. A German taxidermist named Hermann Ploquet had a display of anthropomorphic taxidermy. So I'm pretty sure that's the little squirrels sitting around playing poker and having a tea party and, you know, racing each other like little racehorses or something like that. So anyways, that was that exhibition attracted 6 million people in 1851. And that was one of the most sought after, crowded exhibitions in the entire Great Exhibition that took place in London. And that point in time is considered to be the turning point for taxidermy in the world. And it broke loose and becoming popularized. So Kyle has those mounts behind him in his office there, thanks to some squirrels playing poker in Hyde Park in London in 1851. Otherwise, you would have no idea what taxidermy was. So there you go. There's There's your taxidermy fact for the week, folks. You know, somebody's going to be going, oh my gosh, those are so silly. And then they're going to be on a game show, be duck, duck, duck. Did you, 1851? I know this from the podcast. So just share your winnings with us, folks. The other funny thing here is with this show, this is a first. We're in year 7 now. This is a first. So you know how the Discovery Channel has Shark Week? Well, we have Chris Everett month. So this is the first time we've had the same guest back on for both episodes in 1 month. So just a little while ago, Chris's episode aired at the start of September on what Safari Club International Canada's up to. And then we're back with her talking about Canadian Wildlife Conservation Partners. So I'll just introduce everybody here. So Chris Everett, you're the Chapter Advocacy Services Specialist. That's a long title for SCI Canada.
Mm-hmm.
Kyle Stelter, this is your returning guest on the show as well. You're the CEO of the Wild Sheep Society of British Columbia. Welcome back.
Thank you.
Doug Chiasson, which I have heard he's got an excellent podcast himself, is the executive director of the Fur Institute of Canada. Brian McRae, first time on the show. Welcome. You are the Director of Government Affairs Canada for Delta Waterfowl.
Yes, sir.
Welcome, everybody. This is awesome. So I don't know if you guys sort of elected a spokesperson, but I'm hoping as we kind of go through the conversation here about the new partners and partnership, if you just kind of want to jump in, I can single some folks out, speak on behalf of your organization as well. But I think, you know, where I kind of want to roll in, I don't know if Chris, if you want to kick it off, the Canadian Wildlife Conservation Partners, CWCP, that's the easy acronym that doesn't spell a word. What is it?
Well, this came about over a year ago now. Conversations were happening in Ottawa at the Conservative Hunting and Angling Caucus outdoor symposium about building a national collaborative. And it was identified that we didn't really have that unified national voice. And so when I switched over to SCI and started working on the Canadian issues with them, I reached out to my colleagues that are on the call or on this podcast with us today and kind of pitched them the idea of let's work together. Let's figure out what this looks like. How can we all work together to build this national collaborative that's going to be inclusive of all wildlife advocacy organizations across the country and have that, you know, fight against what governments have done in dividing us and bring us all back together. And so we've really taken the year to kind of dive into what it could look like. We reached out to some partners down in the US to see what some of their collaborative organizations look like. And we met with the American Wildlife Conservation Partners, and we really liked what they had set up and their kind of rules and policies and procedures. And so we took their document and we formulated it for what we felt would be best for Canada and took that back to our perspective or our respective board of directors, got the approval, and now we're moving ahead. We're forging ahead and we're launching. So it's a really exciting time for us. And I'm really thankful for these guys for being really great sounding boards. And I think we found something that we can be all very proud of and that everyone who is interested in joining and being part of this will be very happy and proud to be part of as well.
Cool. Well, that's a great introduction into what we are covering in this show. So I want to go around to each of you now, and I guess speak from your heart, from your organization's perspective. Like, what does this mean, Brian, to Delta Waterfowl? Why did your organization here in Canada feel this was important to get involved in?
Yeah, great question. And again, thanks for having me on. As Chris said, there have been conversations happening for quite a while, and there's been a really big need for a really inclusive national voice that spans from coast to coast to coast, that kind of all organizations could really participate in when needed or when called upon. As you said early on, there's massive strength in numbers, and when you look at all of the organizations across Canada representing their members and donors and supporters in all acts, we're a very, very large crowd, and this is something that I think has been really noticed probably in the last few years. I've been with Delta for 3 years, but previously I was with one of the wildlife federations for 14. And so I've been around it a long time in a lot of the discussions. And yeah, when it comes to, whether we're dealing with a firearms topic or land access topic, it seems that we're just never really fully represented. And some organizations might not have the ability to be represented or to participate because all organizations are, varying sizes and degrees of their makeup and accessibility to, staffing and all that sort of stuff. So, we felt it was important for us to, like Chris said, look for an avenue that we can bring folks together in times of need. And, obviously we, as in Delta, we are part of the AWCP, which has been longstanding in the US. As Chris said, we all traveled out to Calgary about a month ago to participate in their meetings to really get a better handle of how the AWCP handles everything that's thrown at them. And we all really enjoyed it. And we thought it was a great opportunity. We knew it was going to be a good opportunity for Canada, and it's been something that's been kind of we've been starved of. But it really excited us and kickstarted to kind of where we are and kind of helped to finalize the plans. And I think one of the things that is going to be really unique about the CWCP is unlike the AWCP, which only tackles really federal issues. We are going to have the ability to get into the provincial and territorial issues as well. We obviously know there's a handful of topics that come up, seems like quite frequently over the past few years at the federal level that really, we can bring in lots of support for. But in Canada, I've said this all along, some of our biggest threats, our largest threats are more localized at the provincial level and sometimes even at the local level. So, this is going to provide an opportunity and an avenue for like-minded organizations to support one another when it fits within, what they are trying to achieve, gives people the ability to support a letter or just kind of remain silent per se for various reasons. But it enables all organizations to be part of something to bring those numbers up. And at the end of the day, when you can unite, hundreds of thousands of people, millions of people on a singular topic, that's powerful. And something that I think, we are very fortunate being, around the table here is we're all very like-minded in that there's no such thing as us. It's no I, it's we. We collectively win and we collectively lose. And, we have to get away from the mindset of everyone's competition when in reality, we all have to be working together on topics so we can all continue to do what we love to do.
No, it's great input. Doug, this is new for the Institute. Like trapping is always hunting and trapping, but that usually means hunting, right? And then you've kind of had to fight your way along on the side, like with your own meetings in Ottawa, and now this is exciting. You're just kind of finally part of hunting and trapping heritage in Canada. And
this has been really, an interesting couple of months as we've been having these conversations. Like you say, trapping is a very particular subset of our, hunting and trapping you know, community. And, you know, certainly just about every trapper is also a hunter, but, you know, many of issues that affect trappers also affect hunters. And, you know, this is a way I think that we can, as the Institute, that we can help expose more people to the issues that are facing trappers, and also help make sure that trappers are supporting, you know, our friends in the hunting community as well. And, you know, a lot of overlap on especially things like firearms, things like land access. And, you know, for me, and with where I sit at the Institute, you know, ironically, we're very involved at the international level in working with hunting organizations at the international level. We're members of the International Council for Game and Wildlife Conservation. We're members of FACE, the European Hunting Federation. So, you know, we see what can be achieved by international collaboration, by different groups from different places coming together and, you know, throwing support of Canadian trappers behind, you know, hunters in Southern Africa, or the hunters in Central Asia, or hunters in Europe. And, you know, it's one of those things where we deal with these things internationally. And then, you know, I'd go to meetings in Romania or Turkey or wherever and come back and be like, why can't we do that here in Canada? Like, why can't all of us across this giant piece of land, you know, why can't we all be pulling in the same direction? It's not that there will never be particular points where we have, you know, well-reasoned disagreements, but on the real kind of nuts and bolts, real central ideal things, you know, we should be able to collaborate. We should be able to cooperate. And, you know, in doing so, the only and most important thing we do is strengthen the hunting and trapping community, the outdoor heritage community, and show people that, you know, sit at the desks that Chris and I used to sit at when we worked in politics. We worked at Parliament Hill. You know, when you get that letter that has 15 or 20 different organizations signed on it at the end of the letter, and you go, oh no, we can't just respond to this with a form letter. Like we got to pay attention to this one. Because certainly there's, you know, informal kind of conversations of like, hey, we talked about what we're going to put in the letter, you know, before this. Hey, let's talk about, what are you writing a letter on? What am I writing a letter on? And we all end up sending essentially the same letter. But it's one letter from the Fur Institute, one letter from SCI, one letter from Delta, one letter from Sheep Society BC. But getting that one letter with 4 organizations on it, and then ideally, as we continue to grow the CWCP, that those letters start to have 10, 15, 20, 25, 30 signatures on them, you know, that's where decision makers will really have to start to, you know, take notice of, okay, they're finally organizing themselves. The day we always dreaded has finally come, where the hunters and trappers are stopped fighting with each other long enough to fight with us. And, you know, we can be, you know, and we can be partners with government. We can be collaborative with government. If they want to do good things, we're more than happy to encourage them to continue to do good things. But, you know, that's where I think the real value of doing something like joining CWCP comes from.
No, that's great. I do love, and I love working with you on the trapping podcast, because you got this international touch to things, and you and I have got into conversations about, yeah, this has to do with seal and seal products, which really impact us. But, you know, Doug would be like, hey, if you look at that, this is a CITES thing. This is also has influence on this and that in the hunting world, and it's just immensely valuable working with you, because you have that international perspective. Kyle, from the Wild Sheep Society of BC's perspective, what does this mean to you and your organization and your membership?
Yeah, I think, Mark, one thing that really stood out for the society and was sort of a landmark moment for us was back in 2017 with the grizzly bear here in BC, and you're very familiar with it. I don't need to educate you on what we went through there, and just how it was just so easy for government to just sort of unilaterally make a decision. And we all know the reasons behind it, but you know, sort of front of mind is science really wasn't a factor. It was sort of emotional. It was an election sort of
promise effectively, and it's much more complicated than that. But we as hunters and a conservation community just sat there and just let it happen. And there wasn't really a lot of feedback, a lot of pushback, and we never really got on the same page here in British Columbia. And I know you were active during that time, Mark, and you seen it too. And it was like, wow. And it was just so easy for that to go away. And of course, when things like that go away, they don't come back too quickly, as we've seen over the last 8 years. So, that was a landmark time for us, and our members were concerned. And I wrote a white paper at the time to our membership and just said, what are we doing here? Like, this is way too easy for the government. And, we need to sort of do things a little differently and need to think about what we're doing here and get a little bit more on the same page and do a little bit of PR work too. So that was sort of the genesis of our One Campfire campaign, which I don't want to, drag things in the mud on that. But, that was sort of the genesis of, trying to have a broader voice outside of our community. And then also realizing that we're just such an island. Like if we're all kind of individually as orgs going, oh, we need to do something here. And we talked to different orgs and we just weren't on the same, we weren't aligned. And so during that time, between now and 17, all these things have happened. We've seen all the stuff on the gun rights and a bunch of other issues that have come up. And there's all these looming threats. And what really was poignant was last year when we were out at the conservative hunting, angling, and conservation symposium that Blaine Calkins and his colleagues hosted, and that Chris had referenced earlier. And we were all kind of sitting there going, man, we really need to get aligned here. Like we could see it. You could just feel it. We're like, and Blaine was the host and he was talking about it. We're all like, yeah, we need to do something. And we're like, and then we're kind of all looking around the room going, okay, who's going to do something? And we're all kind of just like, you could just feel it. And you were there, Mark, you were in the room. And for me, it was so poignant, like, oh man, we need to get our act together here. And I don't know what that looks like. And so our board, we came back from that, and my colleague, Vice President Chris Barker, was there, and we came back to our board and said, like, we need to figure this out. And we've had really good dialogue with Chris on this issue before. And so our board right away said, yeah, you need to do something. And it's interesting, we're the Wild Sheep Society BC. All three orgs here are federal organizations. We're kind of the black sheep of the group. But there's so many issues that really, really affect us here in British Columbia, federally, provincially, and sort of our vision and the society. One of our purposes is to unite sportsmen and sportswomen. And I believe, and our board believes, and our membership, I think too, is that we really need to align messaging and sort of collaboration and just hold the government accountable and just, start looking after the needs of hunters and others too, people that really care about the outdoors. So we're really doubled down on this. We feel it's critical for our future. And we've started kind of as a small group, but our vision is inclusivity. Like, we want this thing to be a powerhouse so that when the CWCP shows up with an issue, government listens. It's interesting. We talked during our sort of process of building what we're building here. We reached out to the Congressional Sportsman Foundation. We reached out to the American Wildlife Conservation Partners, which we've talked already about that. And, those two orgs are a trusted voice. Sometimes government, elected officials will come to them for, hey, what do we need to do here? That, like, they're the trusted official. And, that's true power, right? And I feel like that's what we need to get to as an org. And, for us, I think what we realized is there just wasn't that. It didn't exist in Canada. We don't really have that. We don't have a powerful voice, and our vision is to have that voice. And again, it wasn't, we're not trying to create something that someone else. It just, there's a void. We need to get on the same page, and we're really hopeful that there'll be this massive. And hopefully, my vision is that the society's name is long forgotten, and SCI and Delta and Canadian Fur Institute, that people don't even think about that. They just think about this machine that government will never mess with. They can't afford, so that when they show up in Ottawa or regionally too, that people are really listening. And our board's 100% behind that, and really excited about where this hopefully will take us.
Fantastic. Yeah, that's Yeah, I like the vision stuff that you added in there as well. So that's important for early founders to kind of see, where we want to go, where we need to get to. So very cool. Thanks for that. Chris, so do you want to layer on something specific to this question? Like, what does being part of this through SCI Canada mean to your organization, to your membership? And then from that, maybe you can segue into the next part, which is structure. How is this going to function? Who's in charge? Who makes that sort of org chart sort of process? So
Yeah, for sure. I mean, for SCI Canada, we have members across the country in all corners in all provinces and the territories. So it's super important for our organization to be part of a collaborative such as this to be able to bring a lot more voices to the table and just work collectively with other organizations because it's all about strength in numbers and like all the guys have kind of indicated, when you have that massive list of names of organizations coming from all walks of the outdoors coming together on a single issue, government is going to take note because even just looking at our 4 organizations, we come from very diverse backgrounds when it comes to the outdoors and the opportunities that all of our membership does and takes. So we're really looking forward to just being part of that on the ground level. For structure, we're going to have a steering committee, which the 4 of us make up at this point. And the idea is that after 2 years, we'll hold elections or once we reach 20 members. So we'd love to see 20 members right away and for us to then revisit this conversation at that point. But we'll kind of steer it to make sure that we keep that inclusivity, that openness, that transparent conversation going, that everyone feels comfortable with their decision to be part of our organization or our collaborative. And we'll go from there. And we want to make sure that it's well balanced. So we will have organizations from, wildlife federations to guide outfit organizations to fur and trapping organizations. We're going to make sure that they're all able to be at that table and helping to make the decisions in steering this as we move along and as we grow. And I'm really looking forward to seeing how that happens and looking for feedback from people as well, that we can all kind of make this into an even better organized or better collaborative.
yeah, no, that's exciting. Now, you've probably all experienced this in your member organizations, trying to have like a strategic direction, a strategic plan, some goals you want to, achieve for a year. What are your priority issues that you need to put all your resources to? And then as that goes out in your membership, it's like there's a whole bunch of fires out there down at that local and regional level. You probably haven't, experienced that yet, but maybe through your conversations, because you're all spread out across the country. How do you envision sort of having to chart a strategic path and some big issues and pick and choose among the different topics that are out there?
Well, I think the the structure of how this is going to work, and this is one of the things that I think we found really attractive about the AWCP's model, is it's very decentralized. This isn't here is the executive of the board of directors of the membership, and really it's only at the very top that decisions get made. This is a model that allows really any member of the CWCP to put up their hand and say, hey, here's the issue we're dealing with. I'm going to draft a letter, or I've got some ideas and I want to work with steering committee to draft a letter. And it feeds upwards, not downwards. It's really not a top down approach. And we wanted to also take that approach in our governance, and that's why Chris speaks to the 2 years or 20 members. We didn't want to have a super prescriptive, here is exactly how this is going to work, because Chris and Brian and Kyle and Doug decided this is exactly how it's going to work. And if you don't want to come in our treehouse, then you can go build your own treehouse. We want people to be able to bring their expertise, their experience to the table within the CWCP, and, you know, bring with them ideas about how we can evolve, how we can adapt, how we can overcome, and really build a stronger organization with each member who joins, instead of really painting ourselves into a corner of this is exactly how we think this has to work. And if you disagree with us, then, you know, too bad, so sad. You know, I think that that's really what's led to the failure of many of the attempts to do, you know, something like this in the past, you know, whether at the federal level or in some cases the provincial level, of they ended up with something that was, you know, too rigid. And if something's too rigid, it breaks. So we want to be flexible. We want people to bring the best of themselves to the table, so that this really does end up being more than the sum of its parts. That every organization that joins the CWCP makes the CWCP stronger, and makes the CWCP stronger than just each individual organization, you know, SCI plus FIC plus Delta plus Sheep Society. You know, we want this to be something more.
Yeah, well, great. Brian, just shifting gears a little bit, you come from a very, very large organization, both sides of the borders. You know, I often maintain, and I've stand my ground on this issue. I think the single greatest conservation success in North America is the Migratory Bird International Treaty that was ratified between Canada and the United States, because it was the first time in the history of conservation in North America we looked at a guild of species of animals at the scale of a continent, because their lives depended on habitat that was at the scale of a continent. So your organization reflects that. You reflect maybe the largest chunk of habitat that you know is maybe outside of the African continent as far as, you know, scale of things. You got to be able to talk effectively with everybody that's in an organization when you get big. What do you think the key elements of a communication strategy is going to be as you start getting flooded with membership calls after this podcast, and you got 150 members all of a sudden, and you got to talk effectively? Because, you know, you guys all know in your world, it's like somebody's like, well, nobody told us, and how come we didn't hear about that, right? Like, you want everything to be snappy and roll out and everybody's fully informed. What would be your vision for that?
Yeah, it's a great question, and actually, I definitely going to welcome lots of folks reaching out after the podcast. You know, everyone on this call, that's, you know, we're not here without our members, right, and our supporters and our donors. And, you know, if they're engaging enough to reach out to us, you know, we're definitely going to take the time. So I hope that number's 250 mark or more. But you know, this was something that you know, something that we talked about as a team. And you know, obviously, from an organizational standpoint, again, you know, we are already part of the AWCP, and this has been a great need. We've already kind of identified that. And, you know, collectively with our group, you know, we had these very discussions. And as much as we probably had opportunities to kind of start getting out there a little bit over the past little while, even though we were going to get this, you know, this train was going to start gaining momentum. We really slowed the process down to make sure we had all our T's crossed and I's dotted, to a point where we all felt comfortable in talking about what the CWCP was going to do, you know, how we were going to try to accomplish it, and you know, how we wanted to kind of roll out with it. So you know, collectively, we are launching. I've got a calendar over here. Soon, a couple weeks, you know, we're going to have a press release that will go out. Obviously, it'll be shared amongst all of our organizations through e-blasts, etc. Social media will likely be a big part of that as well. You know, and we're doing it on a day that holds near and dear to all of our hearts, on the National Fishing, Hunting, Trapping Heritage Day. We felt that was a kind of a prime time to let the cat out of the bag, so to speak, for something that's got, huge potential in Canada. And I think we all think will have, will generate a lot of interest and a lot of discussions, and a lot of excitement, I think, because, we've talked about, there's always stuff going on. And, Doug just kind of talked about this when he was talking. I think one of the beauty components and aspects of how this is going to work is that it enables anybody to come forward on a topic. And, obviously the federal stuff is pretty simple because it engages us all, right? It's something hits and it impacts every single one of us. But provincially, although other provinces might not be necessarily in that same fight, the same fight exists in their province, either yesterday or ongoing in a different capacity. So, we're excited to kind of launch it, have discussions with other organizations and get it out there, for people to kind of consume. And, we're definitely going to be excited to chat with anyone who wants to talk about it. So.
Cool. Kyle, I do want to come back to One Campfire. Like, don't feel bad promoting that. So folks, if you don't know about One Campfire, search them up on Instagram and stuff. They occupy an amazing space in this conversation, that they're speaking the language and asking the nuanced questions with completely the people in mind that know nothing about hunting, have a certain views of hunting, or are trying to understand what hunting's about. It's a beautiful thing. It kind of in my Instagram feed, it kind of reminds me of that, the philosophy pages that you follow. Like One Campfire comes up and they'll pose like this little question. You're like, oh, wow, that's good. It's your morning coffee or whatever. And it even as a hunter, it makes me think, do you think there's a really big and broader role for One Campfire to plug into CWCP here, to be echoing in step, in concert with the issues that you're addressing nationally, to be speaking those same topics with that non-hunting crowd? Or is it going to just kind of carry on doing its own thing? Like how much do you steer the ship strategically with them?
Yeah, I do think One Campfire has that role. And, One Campfire mantra has always kind of been, we're not as different as you think. It's kind of trying to have the non-hunting public understand that hunters aren't that much different. And I think that some of the issues that we're seeing, and we're not getting into the weeds here, but we talk about some of these regional issues, for example, and there's this land use planning stuff that's going on in British Columbia now, and I know, Mark, you've blown the whistle on that, and Manitoba's going through some of that stuff, and there's 30 by 30 and IPCAs, and there's all these things, and they affect hunters, but they're going to affect everybody, right? Like if they, if there's issues around access, and we've seen it through Joffrey Lakes and a whole bunch of different examples. So I think a lot of these issues are beyond the hunting space, and the fur and the trapping side of things as well. So I think these are broader issues. I do think One Campfire does have a role to play. Obviously what Wild Origins is doing, you guys are have an incredible message, and certainly, we all thought it was really appropriate to be on your podcast here to sort of launch this, that, this is kind of the voice of our community. And so I do think that it's a lot of these issues are hunting and outdoor user and certainly trapping centric, but it's much bigger than that. And I think a lot of hunting stuff, like One Campfire caters to that 80% in the middle. We're not marketing for hunters. We're not marketing for the non-hunter, because we're probably not going to change the non-hunter or the anti-hunter, sorry. But it's that 80% in the middle. We really want to affect that sort of that middle block. And I think that we have a lot of shared issues there. We care about outdoor access. We care, I think when you talk to the average non-hunter, the 80%, and you tell them about science-based wildlife management and while balanced ecosystems are important, they understand that. They actually care, and they it's important to them. And so I think platforms like certainly Howl, but Wild Origins, One Campfire. These are all important messages, both internally, but certainly out externally as well. And I think there's a role to play there for sure. And, One Campfire will certainly want to do its part. And I think that, that's one thing that we're seeing in Ottawa. There's just not enough voices to the elected officials that understand the issues that are important to us. And we're just getting run over. They're just they're not sort of giving their enough respect for what's important to us. And we're not just talking about a couple 100,000 people. We're talking literally millions of Canadians that are affected by a lot of these issues. So, and they're going to be a lot bigger. The things that are important to hunters and trappers and gun owners, you can see a lot of these things are going to affect a lot of Canadians, not just a sort of a microcosm.
Yeah, no, for sure. No, good. Thanks for that. Good. So Chris, I'll flip this one to you first, and then others kind of weigh on this afterwards. We're a huge country, second largest country in the world. Our East Coast and our West Coast and our North and Southern borders, like there's entire hundreds of countries over in Europe fit into that space. And culturally, we're different. Ecologically, we're different. What hunting means to somebody in Nova Scotia is very different than in the Yukon. And the average person or the average smaller organization tends to think, what are our issues? What's just affecting us here at home? What's affecting our membership? And you've got to make this larger value proposition to, like, you got to get involved. You got to care about the spring black bear hunt in Nova Scotia. You got to care about a grizzly bear hunt in British Columbia, even though you might never come and do it. Chris, and then others can follow. What's the value proposition because part of it, people got to join organizations and then convince organizations to become part of the CWCP. So from your heart, what's that message to somebody that's as far away in Canada as you could possibly get, distance-wise, cultural-wise, and what they hunt, to say, you got to care nationally?
Well, I think it doesn't matter what corner of the country you're in right now, there is regulation changes and anti-hunting groups and organizations that are attacking your way of life. It doesn't matter what species you hunt or what you fish or how you live your life outdoors. There's constant attacks. Kyle referenced 30 by 30 and some of those issues. The access to the public lands is being eroded, that people can't get access. We see what's happening in Manitoba. We see, BC access issues. And so this is something that is coming across the country and that every corner is affected by. And I think that's kind of one of the big things that we're going to be pushing and encouraging organizations and groups to get involved, because we're all being attacked from all different corners. And so the more united and the more, we always say this in every meeting we have, is strength in numbers. And the bigger the number, the more strength we have to be able to make change and to fight against regulatory proposals that governments have that are going to impact all of us at the end of the day. And so I think it's important that organizations that maybe you don't feel like you don't have that big of a voice, but, that rod and gun club that's in a rural town in northern Saskatchewan or even out in New Brunswick, maybe you only have 50 members, but that doesn't matter, because you're still an organization, you're still a voice for people, and we want you to be part of this and to join up and feel comfortable that we've got your back as well. And that's the real selling feature for us in this, is that we're going to be able to get that large of a collection of people, I think, that are going to be able to respect each other's differences. SCI might have some views that Delta might not share, right? But we respect each other because we're all in this space. We're all fighting for conservation of wildlife. We're all fighting for our hunting rights and our hunting heritage. And so I think it's important to respect that difference and to know that, you're welcome at the table. You're welcome to be part and feel like you're or lending your support to something that's much larger than you. And I think that's what's going to really kind of help resonate with people and help people feel comfortable to join in.
Cool. Good thoughts there. Doug, what's kind of your message to folks out there in Canada, the value proposition, why they need to care to be about something bigger? Because you probably see it. Yeah, we were talking about this 20 years ago and nothing ever seems to change. And, like it's, I do
No, I
find
mean,
one of the things that we're fighting against is people losing hope. And then here we got to come and give them that talk, that pep talk, that value proposition.
Yeah, exactly. And I think that, one of the things that I see from, or I hope to see from CWCP, and it's something that we see, our friends in the US are much better at than we are. And our friends in Europe as well, is, speaking to the local and regional and provincial side of this is, if they were going to outlaw snaring in Illinois, the Nevada Trappers Association, the New Mexico Trappers Association, the New York State Trappers Association, the Connecticut Trappers Association, every single one of them is going to write a letter or testify at committee or whatever. And I think that's something that, the CWCP, where it is a bottom up model, allows someone like, folks here in Nova Scotia to say, hey, we really need help putting some pressure on our provincial government to get a spring bear hunt. And we're just going to keep using Nova Scotia spring bear hunt. That's the, and who supports Nova Scotians being able to hunt bears? Everyone supports, in our community, would support the idea of Nova Scotians being able to hunt bears. And in the spring. And I can, personally attest from my time working at the legislature in Winnipeg, is it's one thing when you're working for a provincial politician and you get a letter from your provincial association, because you're used to dealing with your provincial association. You probably know the people. If you're in charge of natural resources in the province of Manitoba, you probably know the people at the Manitoba Trappers Association or Manitoba Lodge and Outfitters Association. But all of a sudden you get a letter that has the New Brunswick Trappers and Fur Harvesters Federation on it and has, APOS on it from Alberta and has national associations like the FIC and Delta on it. And all of a sudden you're going like, wait, something's going on here. Someone threw up the bat signal about this issue here. And we have to pay closer attention to how we respond to this issue, because there's a lot of people watching. And it's not just here in our own backyard. There are people across the country watching what we do with this. And that level of scrutiny, more than anything, but also showing that there is support for these things broader than just at home in your own backyard. It's not going, okay, well, Manitobans are on side with this, but we're worried about what Ontario is going to say, or we're worried about what Newfoundland Labrador is going to say. But then you get this letter saying, oh, well, all these associations and organizations in provinces and territories across the country think we should do this. And maybe, ministers or wildlife directors would be a little bit more emboldened to say, well, maybe we should have a spring bear hunt here in Nova Scotia, because I got a letter of like 35 different organizations saying we should have a spring bear hunt here in Nova Scotia. So that's the kind of thing where, speaking to this kind of, stronger than the sum of its parts idea of something like CWCP, where, there may be, and at the same time, it can kind of work in the inverse of going, okay, we got this letter from 35 different organizations, but there's one on there that we really care about. We really care what Delta has to say about this, but wow, look, all these other associations and organizations also have an opinion. And it just so happens it's the same opinion that Delta has. That can go a long way towards making sure that, politicians or decision makers, departmental decision makers see the kind of full breadth of the issues that they're dealing with and who is paying attention to these issues, and that these things aren't just a backyard issue anymore in the world of social media and Zoom calls and Riverside, that we can get around the world and say across Canada and say this is something that's really important.
Yeah, no, good points. Kyle, a couple years ago, I remember, I was probably talking something that was going on here in BC, and somebody got a hold of me through social media. They were from Ontario, and the general thing was, you know what? I don't really care what's happening to you out there in BC. I can't come to British Columbia and hunt a stone sheep as a Canadian citizen, so you guys can go pound sand. And I've run into these little kind of blocks and attitudes. I don't think they represent the hunting community, the trapping community as a whole. But I see our nation greatly influenced by the United States and the public land system, where somebody from Florida can buy a non-resident elk tag in Montana or Nevada, and they can go there, and then they can go to Utah and get another one and stuff, because it's treated differently. Like, it's public land, and these out-of-state tags are available. That's not our system in Canada. And I do in some ways find that's a little bit of a barrier to getting folks from one side of the country to actually care, because there is a tiny bit of what's in it for me. So what's your value proposition to say, hey, nation, there's this thing going on with stone sheep in British Columbia, and I need everybody to care and and get involved, knowing well that pretty much most of the people in Canada will never freely have the opportunity to come unless they hire an outfitter. How do you speak to that someone?
I think that, if we're going to talk gun rights, and that's really not the intent of CWCP, that's not, our wheelhouse. But if you look at the death by 1,000 cuts across this province, this country, and it's just pervasive, and it's just, that there's a lot to lose. And I think that, if we take that mentality, and I think that's one thing about this group that I love, that, it's been something as a vision when we created CWCP, was supporting everybody holistically, that we're really working collaboratively. And there are sort of caveats too. If somebody can't sign on an issue for a particular reason, they have the opportunity not to sign on to some of our letters. So that's kind of getting in the weeds on this. But I think it's an important part of what we're doing, is that we have a voice, a collective voice. And if for some reason that you just cannot support an issue for whatever reason, and it doesn't matter what, you simply can leave your name off the letter. We still are, as a coalition, we're still forwarding the letter, and you might not be a signatory on that, and that's fine. But I think what we bring to the table is this inclusivity and this concept that, if it aligns with our values, and our values are pretty, and again, I won't go in the weeds on this, but, science-based wildlife management, sustainability, biodiversity, conservation, and then certainly supporting hunting and trapping. That's a core tenet of what we're doing here. If it sort of aligns with that and it's legal, that's something that we hope that as a collaborative that we can support. I think that's kind of our vision from what I've gleaned working together with these four organizations. So I think that there's strength in numbers, and that there's regional issues that, obviously it's not going to affect the Wild Sheep Society BC. And one that keeps coming to mind when you're asking questions, Mark, earlier, and Doug was replying, was the seal hunt. That's a classic example, right? Like, that's not an issue for the society, but man, this predator prey issue and what's going on there, and government decisions, that's something we need to get all over that. We need a voice for that, and we need a national voice for that. And that's something that I can get behind, and I'm sure the society's memberships can get behind, because it's something that, when we start talking about wolves in BC, now that's something that affects us very, very personally. Again, maybe it's not something that Doug's worried about on the East Coast, but it's something that we need to be all thinking about. So I think we're just better together. And if we start trying to fight this battle one org at a time, we're done. We're just so done. And I think that's part of our problem. I think that's why we're having this conversation today. We've done it for too long. I think we need to do a better job. That's my feeling.
Yep. No, I think the time's right. Brian, do you see the need for this as this organization evolves, as the partners evolve, to have broader written principles, policies, that sort of thing, which you can fall back onto? Because of course, in this field, it's sort of like you've seen it over your career, like the same issues the thread will find its way through like multiple areas. And you want to have kind of like the patterned, well, if it doesn't matter if it shows up here or if it shows up in trapping or it shows up wherever, this is what we stand for, as an organization. Do you think there's going to have to be some high level pieces even to show others these are some founding principles, some founding policies, some baseline beliefs that the founders started out with? Or is it going to be an issue by issue?
Yeah, it's a great question, and we do have some of that stuff now. We've carried some of that stuff over from the AWCP, which really we felt fit. We made it Canadiana essentially, and pulled the pieces what we felt would work here. And will there have to be some tweaks? Probably, as we move forward, right? We felt we got it into a spot where we could start, and I think what we're seeing right now, and I think we've all seen this, is we are having our narrative written for us. And we've been having the narrative written for us for a while. And, I'm based in Ontario, and one of my big files I spend a lot of time on here in Ontario is right down at the municipal level, and then discharge of firearm bylaws, which municipalities can just write with a stroke of a pen, and they can remove access to everybody from shooting. They can just prohibit shooting for no rhyme or reason other than just saying 2 words: public safety. They don't have to prove it, don't have to do anything. And I always tell people, when we have these discussions, and we've been involved probably in about 18 of them over the last 2 years alone in Ontario. And, I've been involved with probably close to 100 of them in the past 15 to 20 years. And I never get involved in these issues to open up access. It's always to remove access. And that's kind of where I'm going with this is, our narrative is always being written. And right now we're collectively, individually, we are coming at it from a reactive state. Everything that comes up is really on a reactive state. And one of the things that really excites me anyways is, yes, as we launch and as we are small and continue to grow, we'll always be reactive to things that pop up. We can't control that. But one of the things that I look forward to is when the CWCP has 30, 40, 50 names on the organization list, similar to our friends down south, is starting to flip that narrative a little bit, and us start to control some of the messaging and being proactive in some of these pieces, and going to government saying, hey, and like it was said earlier on, often stuff is kind of vetted through them. I think that's a real opportunity here, and as we grow as a collective, absolutely, Mark, there's probably going to have to be some tweaks, but I think we've got the CWCP in a state now that allows for a lot of growth and opportunity. And I think, as I think Doug said this the best earlier on, is this is really about opportunities from the bottom up, and getting everyone inclusive, and everyone have that voice and opportunity to get involved in something. But obviously, as time goes on, as we grow, absolutely, that we may have to look at that. But that's why we've got a great group collectively right now. That group's going to continue to grow. We've got a steering committee, that will be able to have those discussions. And getting into the weeds, there'll be yearly meetings that people can attend and stuff like that. So I think that opportunity is there, as it always should be there. But I think we're in a good spot to start it from where we are, and as we grow, then we always revisit things. But I'm really looking forward to starting to get to a point where we can control some of the script and come and be more proactive than reactive. Because right now everything's reactive. Everything we do at the federal level, it's reactive. The provincial level, it's reactive. The municipal, local level, it's reactive. Right. So, I think that's another great benefit of what we and I'm not even just talking about, the four orgs on this podcast right now. I look forward to the collective we across the country.
Yeah. No, that's awesome. Yeah, we all dream of getting into that position of being proactive, like where we're going through legislation, going through policy, and having the discussions about it before somebody realizes it's a loophole or they're trying to exploit something that then it impacts our friends, way of life across the country. And I think you're going to get there in a couple of years. You're going to be picking things out and having these proactive policy discussions and driving the bus. So I'm excited to follow your story along as well. I think kind of one of the logical wrap up pieces here, Chris, is where's the storefront? Where do people sign up? How are they going to find you? What's your home phone number?
Oh boy, I'm not handing out my home phone number on here. I'm sorry, but
so people are going to want to, oh, this sounds cool. I got to talk to somebody. Go here. Do what Chris says.
So reach out to one of the four of us is going to be your best option. We're going to have a form that will ask your organization to fill out. So this will include information such as who's your staff contact person that will be the lead staff member in your organization, or lead volunteer in your organization that'll be the point person for you. We have an attestation that your organization will have to sign on to that agrees to the principles of, respect for organizations. There will be no pressure to sign on to any letters that were, just some information like that about, respecting the procedure and understanding that. So we'll send you off that form, you fill it out, you send it back to us, and then you'll be voted on to become part of the CWCP. So to make it easy, I can give my email, and if you guys want to jump in and give yours, you can too, and you can reach out to any of the four of us. But my email is Everett, so CEVERETT at scifirstforhunters.org, and you can reach out to me there, and I can help you out with whatever I can to get you to be part of the CWCP.
Cool, thanks. Yeah, so folks, find any of these organizations on social media and reach out. Wild Sheep Society of BC, Delta Waterfowl, Safari Club International Canada, or the Fur Institute of Canada. And you're going to quickly reach somebody that knows what you're talking about, and away you go. Get some information, get the conversation happening, sign some ink on some papers, and be part of this juggernaut that's developing. Wow, this is exciting. It's launching on an exciting day in this nation. Before we completely wrap up, is there anything about CWCP that I didn't get to that's an important message that you want to get out in these early stages to folks? I'll just kind of go around the table. If there's any final pieces we missed, Kyle.
Well, I just think, Mark, thanks for having us on. Really excited to talk to you about this. And I know you're passionate about it. And I think for anyone listening is there's some orgs out there doing a lot of great work. Our vision is we want a big tent. We want lots of people under it, and we want to have a collective voice. So that's really the vision. This is not about being exclusive. It's inclusive. And as long as, you align with our values, and they're pretty simple. It's basically, if you're hunting and trapping and love outdoor way of life and you want to preserve that heritage, and it's a bit more nuanced than that, but really that's our vision. So we want more people, not less. It's about inclusivity.
Perfect. Doug?
Yeah, one last thing I guess that I would add, and it's the nuts and bolts stuff, is currently no membership fee associated with joining CWCP. We're not turning people upside down by their ankles and shaking quarters out of their pockets at this point. Maybe someday down the road we want to do something, and we'll pass the hat amongst members, but we don't want that to be an impediment to smaller organizations that may be really passionate and have great volunteers, but it's like 16 guys in a rock and gun club in rural Cape Breton. We want everybody to feel like they can be a part of this, and we don't want to set a roadblock in the way right away of like, oh yeah, here, give us your check and then we can talk. That's really not what we're trying to do here.
Perfect. Good wrap up. Somebody's always going to go, yeah, what's the catch? so you're just, Doug blurted it out. No membership fees right now. So there you go. Should have, well, Curtis will edit that and put it right at the very beginning. And we won't lose anybody. So, and according to Doug, this is why you'll listen to this whole hour show. Brian, final kind of thoughts, messages for folks.
Yeah, we actually talked earlier, and we're looking for the loonies and toonies. We're not worried about the quarters at that point, but no, I think I think I'll agree with everything that that was said here. And this, we've all been hearing it for a very long time, that people want to be part of a larger. I'm going to say, I'll use voice again. They want to be part of a larger collective. Everyone wants to get under the tent, and there's a lot of organizations that don't have the ability to do that for a lot of various reasons. And there's also a lot of smaller organizations that, they may feel that maybe their voice doesn't matter because they are small, and that's totally the opposite of what we are trying to do. Because everyone's voice matters, and when we can partner together on a topic that we can all agree on, all those little voices, it becomes really, really loud. And I think that's what's really exciting about this opportunity. So I guess my message to folks is, it doesn't matter how big you are. It doesn't matter if you think your thoughts and opinions don't matter on a specific topic. You're not alone. We're all in this together. And whether it's a small issue on one side of the country or the other, it has ripple effects across the nation, and it does all tie together. So, we look forward to having conversations with you, and, we, as Doug said, we want the big tent.
Fantastic. Chris, final messages to impart on folks?
Just come join us. Let's get rid of the divide that the government has imparted on our organizations for far too long, and let's get everyone working on the same page and fighting the governments and not fighting each other. So I think it's I've had a lot of fun, and it's been a lot of hard work to this point, working with us, with these organizations, trying to get the best product ready to go, or the best, policies and procedures kind of in place. And I think it's going to be really exciting when we launch. I'm really excited with some of the preliminary conversations we've had with organizations and people such as yourself, Mark. I'm really excited to see where this goes, and it's I'll be definitely toasting once we get this off the ground and we get going. So, but yeah, don't hesitate to reach out. Even if you have questions, you're not sure, maybe there's a topic that we haven't covered in this podcast and you want some more information, just reach out and ask, because we're here to answer questions. We want you to be part of it, and we're just excited to get going.
Perfect. Thanks. Great conversation. Super exciting initiative. Look forward to working with you folks as this goes. Curtis, take it away.
Right on. Hunter Conservationist Podcast is brought to you by J. Martin Taxidermy in West Kelowna, BC. Well, he said this is coming out on the Canadian Day of Hunting Heritage.
National Heritage. Yep.
So
20th.
So I think maybe part of that heritage would be getting something mounted. So if you've been having a good hunting season so far, maybe you've lucked out already, send it over to Jesse. He's does some pretty great work to taxidermize. Is that old Chuck Testa commercial? Was that the guy's name? I bet you thought this deer was alive and this grouse. Nope. It's been taxidermized by Chuck Testa. So if you want something taxidermized by Jesse Martin, make sure you send it his way. And if you don't know what I'm talking about, go on YouTube and look up Chuck Testa taxidermy ad because it's pretty funny. So as always, big shout out, big thank you to Jesse and J Martin Taxidermy for supporting us and what we do here on the show. So thank you.
Absolutely. Thanks everybody for your time and for the slow start trying to get Hollywood Squares all organized and audio working. I think we've seamlessly run for an hour recording, so I'm going to sleep well tonight. Folks, the Canadian Wildlife Conservation Partners, Canada's newest national juggernaut. Talk to your organizations, reach out to these folks. This is going to be an amazing momentum, amazing tidal wave that's going to start to happen. And I'll just close out by saying, as you guys go, when you need a voice nationally, you need to push something out through a podcast, you need something to get out on short notice, a talking head, an infographic, anything in the realm of telling your story and getting out to the masses. We're here, our platform's here, and never hesitate to ask us to deliver something for you that's important to all Canadians. So that offer stands for the rest of forever. So thanks for listening, everybody, and we will see you in the next episode.